What you're about to hear isn't speculation. It's not rumor or hearsay. These are the raw, unfiltered courtroom statements from the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs, documented word for word by inner-city press from inside a courtroom. So quiet, so tense, you could almost hear the air shift. It shattered the moment a woman's voice pierced through, steady but hollow, recounting what she says happened behind the sealed doors of Diddy's notorious dark room. That woman was Cassie Ventura. What Cassie described wasn't wild nightlife or consensual excess. It was something else. Ritualized cruelty, orchestrated with clinical precision. A disturbing series of encounters that unfolded like scenes from a horror film where every prop, every sound, every movement was planned. Her words painted a picture of what she called a ritual, not a one-off moment of chaos, but a repeatedly staged performance of domination, humiliation, and control. And Diddy? He sat just feet away, visibly rattled. His hands shook. His breathing grew uneven. Then came the breaking point. He lost it. He screamed in open court. Today, we unpack the testimony that made that moment happen. The testimony that may finally collapse one of the most powerful empires in hip-hop history. When Cassie Ventura stepped forward to take the witness stand, the courtroom atmosphere changed in an instant. A heavy tension fell over the room, like a storm cloud forming indoors. She wasn't just another accuser. She was the accuser, the woman whose civil lawsuit set off a domino chain of federal investigations, industry exits, and public unraveling. And now, 8 months pregnant, wearing a high-necked gray maternity dress, she walked with a quiet determination. Her eyes didn't scan the crowd. They locked forward, fixed on the path ahead. The prosecution began with calm, measured questions. How she met Diddy, how she got her record deal, how their relationship began. But the warmth vanished fast. Cassie told the court that what took place between her and Diddy wasn't some erratic string of wild nights. It was, in her words, a choreographed production. She compared the scenes to movie sets. The lights were dimmed to a specific level. Music playlists were carefully curated ahead of time. Candles, oils, towels, everything was positioned deliberately, down to the exact placement. This wasn't sex. It was performance art directed by a man obsessed with power and aesthetic control. He needed to orchestrate everything, Cassie said. Even at my lowest, it had to look the way he imagined it. She testified that she was forced to narrate everything out loud during these sessions, not in vague terms, but with excruciating detail. He wanted me to describe what I was doing, what I was feeling, what I was seeing, as if I was reading from a script, she told the court. It wasn't enough to go through it. I had to perform it for him verbally. He would sit in a chair, often sipping from a glass, watching her like a director monitoring a scene. She called it audio torture. Phones buzzed silently, in purses and pockets. A juror wiped away a tear. The judge reminded the gallery, no phones, no reactions. She told the court that she was rarely sober during these moments. Alcohol, marijuana, even pills, she didn't always know what they were. He gave them to me, she said. It was easier to dissociate that way, but I was still aware. I always remembered. That sentence lingered in the air, slicing through the courtroom like a blade. Members of Diddy's own family sat frozen. It was the first time they'd heard the allegations described so clinically, so intimately. Cassie's hands clasped tightly in her lap as she prepared to explain what came next. Her voice softened but didn't falter. She said Diddy had a fixation, specifically with skin that shimmered under low light. He was obsessed with sheen, she explained. Prosecutors corroborated this claim with evidence seized during the federal raid on Diddy's estate bottles of baby oil, lubricants, and assorted balms. Cassie revealed that he would pause the sessions every few minutes to reapply the oil, not just on her, but on the male escorts he often invited into the room. He wanted us to look like we were shrink-wrapped, she said, like human mannequins under a spotlight. At first, the courtroom chuckled nervously, but the laughter dissolved when Cassie explained why. It wasn't just about how we looked. It was about stripping away humanity, she said. When you're covered in oil from head to toe, You're no longer a person. You're a thing, a toy, a mirror for someone else's fantasies. She told the court that the constant reapplication wasn't about sensuality. It was about control, about reducing people into objects, slippery, anonymous, and disposable. What followed, steps 3 and 4, only deepened the darkness. But by this point in the testimony, it was clear. This wasn't about celebrity gossip or tabloid spectacle. It was about systematic abuse built on money, fear, and silence. It was about a man who allegedly built a private kingdom where he reigned with unchecked power, and the woman who finally brought a spotlight into its depths. Sometimes she collapsed, under the weight of it all, physically and emotionally. And when she did, he didn't help her. Other times he lashed out, berating her, calling her names, accusing her of sabotaging the performance. According to Cassie, these weren't moments of passion or chaos. They were moments of punishment for deviating from the script. This wasn't about sex, she said flatly. It was about control. He wanted to own the scene, direct the image. He didn't want spontaneity. He wanted submission. She explained that if she did anything unscripted, he'd stop everything. We'd start over, like a reshoot on a movie set. Cassie couldn't say for certain where the footage went, but she said she was convinced it was being archived. He kept everything, she testified. Prosecutors didn't confirm whether any of that footage had been recovered, but when the topic arose, they exchanged subtle nods, as if investigations on that front were already underway, Cassie testified. That Diddy's staff, his personal assistants, the people on his payroll, were sometimes present during the sessions, not as voyeurs, not as concerned bystanders, but as participants in the logistics of the abuse. They'd walk in mid-session, she said, bringing towels, refilling oil, even handing off camera equipment. Nobody ever questioned it. They acted like it was normal, like it was part of their job. Diddy, meanwhile, sat with his eyes glued to the floor, his hands trembling in his lap. His foot bounced beneath the table in a blur of nervous energy. By the time she reached step 3 and step 4 in what she described as Diddy's orchestrated ritual, the courtroom had gone dead silent again. Not a whisper, not a breath. I didn't want to be there, she said, but I knew if I didn't do it, he'd find someone who would. She trembled as she recounted how Diddy would sit back and direct her and the male escort, issuing commands like he was behind a camera lens. He'd say things like, slower, or more eye contact. He wanted me to act like it was some twisted adult film playing out exactly the way he imagined it. Other times, if he felt comfortable enough with the escort, he'd participate. It all depended on how much he trusted the other man, Cassie said. If he trusted the guy, he'd get involved. If not, he'd just sit there, watching, like he was playing God. Cassie said that Diddy would often insist that she collect the male escort's semen and smear it onto his chest and nipples. There was an audible gasp from the press gallery. A juror turned pale. The judge abruptly called for a 5-minute recess. Diddy sat frozen, stone-faced, but his foot shook with such speed it seemed disconnected from the rest of his body. There were no breaks, she said. It didn't matter if I was in pain or bleeding. There were no off days. She recounted how, on several occasions, she had been forced to participate in full scenes during her period. When the mess became too visible, too obvious, staff were summoned to bring fresh linens, as if they were room service attending to a VIP suite. She described lying on the floor, intoxicated, barely able to speak. 2 male escorts stood over her. One of them began to urinate on her while the other watched. Cassie admitted that despite everything, part of her stayed because she was terrified of losing him. Terrified of being alone. Terrified that the outside world wouldn't believe her. The courtroom was still again, save for the clack of court reporters' keys, a haunting echo against the hollow silence of the chamber. Then the prosecution prompted Cassie to provide one final piece of testimony. What did a typical dark room session actually look like, from beginning to end? She responded with a description so methodical, so disturbing in its detail, it sounded less like abuse and more like a production, crafted, designed, and staged like a blockbuster. According to Cassie, The room was always prepped beforehand. Diddy had a designated team, a small, trusted circle, tasked with setting the scene. The lighting, the furniture, the oils, even the playlist. It was all prepared ahead of time. It was like walking onto a set. She recalled one moment in particular, walking into one of these rooms and immediately feeling sick. The walls were painted in matte black. LED strip lights ran along the edges of the ceiling, dimmed to a pulsating red. A speaker played low, looping ambient music. On the side table were several bottles of lubricant, towels folded into perfect squares, and a camera mounted discreetly in the corner. Cassie described one particularly surreal moment, stepping into Diddy's Miami mansion, only to find a man perched on a ladder adjusting a spotlight above a velvet sofa. The man, she recalled, didn't flinch when he saw her. Instead, he casually explained, "He wants the shadows to fall just right." There were always cameras. Some were out in the open, mounted like studio equipment. Others were concealed, hidden behind mirrors, inside vents, embedded in walls. "I stopped trying to count them after a while," she said. Every angle was covered. Cassie testified that she was frequently handed unnamed pills, often by Diddy himself, who would assure her they'd help you feel it better. She was never told what the substances were. No dosage, no name, no label, just blind trust or coercion. The prosecution presented one text exchange between Cassie and one of Diddy's assistants in which she asked plainly, "What was that pill you gave me?" The response, "Don't worry about it." Then came a second message, "Huff," says "take it." Cassie said these substances distorted her perception, blurring time, memory, and emotion. "Sometimes I wouldn't even remember how long it had gone on," she said. "I'd wake up with marks on my body and no idea how they got there." Cassie claimed Diddy had a separate room in his mansion, a locked, climate-controlled space, dedicated entirely to sexual instruments and devices. Some were common, others obscure. A few, she said, came with printed instruction manuals. One device in particular, a large leather-bound apparatus with metallic extensions, left her completely baffled. "I didn't even know how to use it," she said, "so he brought someone in to show me." That someone, she alleged, was a professional male sex worker. Diddy paid him, she said, not only to train her on the device, but to participate in the acts. Cassie told the court that on specific dates, like full moons, birthdays, or anniversaries, Diddy would host what he referred to as spiritual freak-offs. He'd burn incense, blast tribal drums over the speakers, and start reciting these chants, she testified. He told me they came from ancient African rituals. Whether it was theater, delusion, or something darker, Cassie said the effect was chilling. He believed he was channeling something, she said. He said it made him feel closer to a higher power, that what we were doing was part of a transformation. After several days of deeply emotional testimony, prosecutors shifted gears, from psychological control to physical brutality. She explained that the violence wasn't impulsive. It wasn't the result of heat or passion. It was calculated, deliberate. "If I didn't play the part the way he wanted, he'd lash out," she told the jury. "If I cried, if I broke character, if I even hesitated, he'd grab me, like I was breaking the illusion." Cassie recounted one night when she simply said she wasn't in the mood to interact with a male escort. That rejection didn't go over well. "Diddy grabbed me by the arm, dragged me into the room, and slammed the door behind us," she said. "He screamed at me for ruining his night. Then he shoved me so hard I fell backwards onto a metal bed frame." The prosecution then displayed a photograph of the injury, taken years ago by a medical professional. Cassie recounted another night where she tried to walk away in the middle of a session. "I said I needed air," she testified. "He blocked the doorway. Then he slapped me, not in anger, but calmly, like I was a misbehaving child. One assistant handed me a glass of water afterward," Cassie said, her voice shaking. "And," she whispered, "you're okay. You're doing great." That, she said, was the most disturbing part, that they acted like it was normal, like I was doing a good job. To hammer the point home, her legal team played a voicemail allegedly left by Diddy just hours after one of the violent encounters. Prosecutors argued this was part of his pattern, tearing her down, then soothing her just enough to make her stay. "He'd destroy me," Cassie said, "then try to rebuild me in his image." Described as a muscular man in his 30s, he walked into court in a gray tailored suit and dark sunglasses, exuding a calm confidence that sharply contrasted the unease that gripped the room. DA confirmed that he had been involved in multiple sessions with Diddy and Cassie, but he also said that Cassie was the one who initiated contact. "She booked me under fake names," he said. "Sometimes she said it was for her birthday. Other times it was just for fun." He portrayed Diddy as mostly silent during the sessions, watching from a distance, rarely participating, but always in control. When asked directly about the incident in which Cassie claimed she was urinated, DA dropped a bombshell. There was a visible ripple through the room. The prosecution appeared momentarily caught off guard, but quickly shifted. "It was weird," he admitted. "Very controlled. There were rules. No speaking unless spoken to, no touching Diddy, and everything had to be filmed." He recalled one night when Cassie walked up. DA acknowledged he was well compensated, sometimes receiving thousands in cash, but he also admitted that he eventually stopped answering Cassie's calls. "There was one night," he said, "when I saw Diddy throw a glass bottle across the room during an argument. I just didn't want to be around that anymore." Despite some elements of his testimony complicating the prosecution's timeline, the escort known only as DA ended up validating crucial claims, chief among them Diddy's obsession with surveillance, strict control, and a deeply unsettling atmosphere laced with violence. One juror was seen discreetly wiping a tear as DA exited the stand, the weight of his words lingering in the air without any dramatic buildup. The prosecution queued up the now infamous surveillance video from the Intercontinental Hotel in 2016. The courtroom went pin-drop silent. No narration, no commentary, just cold, chilling footage. The tape showed Diddy trailing Cassie down a sterile hallway, grabbing her by the back of her head and slamming her to the ground. He walked away, only to turn back and deliver a brutal kick to her limp body. The prosecution paused and zoomed in on critical moments: Cassie's body hitting the floor, Diddy's unreadable expression, the physical distance between them, evidence that there had been no confrontation, just a sudden, calculated ambush. As the tape played, Cassie stared ahead without blinking. Diddy fidgeted uncontrollably in his seat, hands trembling, jaw clenched. His once flashy bravado now appeared to crack under the weight of what the world was seeing. Next came testimony from Israel Flores, the security guard who had responded that night and who now serves with the LAPD. Flores recalled Cassie being visibly disoriented, shaken, and desperate to leave. "She kept repeating, 'I just want to go,'" he said. He noted a bruise under her eye, though curiously, that detail had never been included in his original 2016 incident report, a flaw the defense seized upon later. Diddy's lawyers argued the clip represented a singular, regrettable outburst, not a sign of a broader criminal enterprise. But prosecutors came back hard, methodically drawing a straight line between the hallway assault and the now infamous darkroom sessions. They introduced digital forensic evidence showing Diddy had deleted dozens of video files from his personal cloud storage in the days following the assault. Some of those files, recovered in part, carried disturbing titles like Cassie and Session Room 3. Suddenly, this wasn't just Cassie's word. There was video, metadata, testimony, patterns, and the man in the defendant's seat was slowly crumbling. As the clip ended, the silence remained. Even jurors who had held stoic expressions throughout began shifting in their seats, some visibly rattled. The prosecution had started this trial with a spark, Cassie's voice, but now they had ignited a full-blown firestorm. What followed was an avalanche of corroborating witnesses. Each added another stone to the crumbling foundation of Diddy's defense. Former assistants, security staffers, and even a forgotten artist from Bad Boy Records took the stand. Their stories echoed the same narrative: fear, submission, routine abuse. One assistant admitted she was tasked with reordering bottles of baby oil and lubricant weekly in bulk. "I was told never to ask questions, just make sure it was stocked," she testified. Another said she once stumbled upon Cassie crying alone in a pitch-black room after a party. "She looked hollow," the woman said. "When she saw me, she whispered, 'Please don't tell him I'm crying.'" But the moment that truly upended the courtroom came from an unexpected witness, Trisha Weller. She had never been mentioned in any court filings, lawsuits, or media reports until now. Trisha testified that she attended what she believed was a private creative dinner at Diddy's mansion in 2017. Within an hour, she found herself locked in a room with 3 unfamiliar men, one of whom was filming. "When I tried to leave, the door wouldn't open," she said through tears. After the event, she received $7,000 via a payment from a shell company tied to Diddy's staff. "I saw Cassie in the hallway afterward. She wouldn't look at me, like she'd seen it all before." The jury's mood shifted palpably. One female juror clutched her notepad so tightly it crinkled under her grip. Diddy, on the other hand, was rapidly unraveling, head down, feverishly scribbling notes, visibly sweating through his shirt. Gone was the polished music mogul who once floated through elite parties in linen suits and Cartier frames. In his place sat a man cloaked in fear, dwarfed by a suit that now seemed to swallow him whole. The prosecution's final stroke was perhaps its most damning, the testimony of a former in-house videographer. The man claimed he had personally destroyed over 300 hours of footage at Diddy's behest. "He told me, 'Burn it. It's not for the public. It's for God's eyes only,' he said." That single phrase brought the courtroom to a standstill. God's eyes only, not only unsettling, but almost cult-like in its tone. Some in the gallery gasped. Others stared at Diddy, who now looked entirely disconnected from the reality unfolding around him. Each witness built on the next. Each piece of evidence layered on top of the last. It became clear this wasn't just a trial about Cassie. It was about a decades-long operation, a meticulously engineered system designed to extract power, obedience, and silence. As the case entered its final stretch, Diddy's legal team appeared worn down, scrambling to pivot their strategy. Meanwhile, the defendant, once the omnipresent icon who commanded every room, now sat alone at the defense table, a shadow of his former self. A courtroom sketch artist captured the haunting moment. Diddy, hunched over, scribbling frantically, face slick. With sweat, his sunglasses nowhere in sight, his empire dissolving with each new word spoken. With his hands pressed tightly against his ears and his mouth agape in what looked like a silent, agonized scream, Diddy sat frozen as the prosecution relayed the most harrowing parts of Cassie's testimony. That image, of a once untouchable mogul visibly unraveling in real time, would later be described by one courtroom reporter as a man watching his own legacy being lowered into the ground. And perhaps, in that moment, he was. In a desperate bid to shift the tide, Diddy's legal team filed an emergency motion requesting the exclusion of several graphic testimonies and pieces of evidence from the jury's consideration. But the presiding judge, unshaken, denied the motion outright. "Given the gravity of these allegations," the judge declared, "this court cannot in good conscience withhold transparency." The room went quiet. Diddy's response was immediate. He slumped forward, leaned into his attorney, and muttered something inaudible before sinking into his palms, a gesture of utter defeat. Then came the prosecution's closing statement, sharp, unflinching, and devastatingly clear. "This trial isn't about poor judgment or mistakes," the lead prosecutor began. "It's about orchestrated trauma. It's about constructing an empire atop the broken spirits of those silenced." She walked the jury through a disturbing timeline, illustrating how every public controversy or whispered accusation over the years had been efficiently managed, either through money, threats, or silence. But the final blow didn't come from witness testimony or video footage. It came from within Diddy's own circle. A whistleblower, once a trusted member of his inner sanctum, had provided prosecutors with a damning internal ledger. This document, a financial spreadsheet never seen publicly before, listed recurring monthly payments with coded descriptions like care, silence, and loyalty. The figures ranged from a few $1,000s to upwards of $80,000. When confronted with this evidence in court, Diddy reportedly kept his gaze fixed. downward, saying nothing. As the trial neared its end, Cassie's team made one last move. They played a chilling voice memo, recorded in 2015. In the audio, a man believed to be Diddy can be heard saying, "People think they can leave me. Nobody leaves me." That single sentence echoed through the courtroom like a curse. Jurors sat in stunned silence. This was the same man who once immortalized himself with mantras like, "Can't stop, won't stop." But in that moment, he had stopped. Everything had. Outside the courtroom, Diddy's fall from grace was no less brutal. His honorary doctorate had been revoked. The university he once called his alma mater publicly cut ties. The symbolic key to New York City had been returned. Brand endorsements vanished. Streaming platforms quietly began removing curated playlists in his name. A multi-million-dollar empire once fueled by fame, style, and charisma now sat in ruins. With over 100 alleged victims now reportedly ready to testify, federal prosecutors hinted that this case could be just the beginning of a far larger operation. A sweeping RICO, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations, case looms. A legal strategy typically reserved for criminal networks, not pop culture icons. If pursued, it could implicate not only Diddy, but a wide array of enablers, handlers, executives, assistants, and even celebrities, who allegedly helped sustain the machinery of exploitation for decades. One thing is beyond doubt now. What started as a lawsuit from a single survivor has morphed into the most explosive reckoning hip-hop and perhaps entertainment history has ever seen. It began as just another morning in the packed federal courtroom, filled with legal teams, journalists, and victims-turned-witnesses. But what followed over the next few hours would permanently redefine the public's understanding of who Sean Diddy Combs truly is. As the proceedings resumed, the courtroom lights dimmed slightly to accommodate video and photographic evidence. Then came the moment no one expected. Diddy, once the king of cool, stoic behind sunglasses, composed in every interview, suddenly let out an audible scream. His voice echoed through the chamber as Cassie Ventura, the woman whose name had been tied to his for over a decade, took the witness stand and uttered just two words that sent chills through everyone present. Dark room. It was no longer just a case about abuse, control, or celebrity power games. It was about something far more sinister, ritualistic torment hidden in the shadows of glitz and glamour. For years, Cassie was seen as the silent beauty by Diddy's side, an R&B artist groomed under his label, a regular at his lavish parties, and the subject of countless tabloid headlines. But beneath the public persona was a woman trapped in a psychological and physical labyrinth of abuse. As she sat before the jury, her voice steady but her hands trembling, Cassie painted a chilling picture of what she called the dark room. Sessions. According to her, these weren't just kinky escapades as some of Diddy's defenders once claimed. These were carefully choreographed sessions of control, punishment, and degradation. The room had no windows, she said. It was always freezing cold. Cameras were everywhere, hidden in vents, behind mirrors. The walls were padded with soundproofing foam. No one could hear you scream. Moments after Cassie's harrowing testimony began, Diddy began twitching in his seat. As she recounted details, the restraints, the psychological tactics, the silence that followed each session, he started to mutter, then sob, before finally letting out a gut-wrenching scream. Court officers rushed toward the defense table. His attorney put a hand on his shoulder to calm him down, but Diddy pushed it away. "She's lying," he shouted. "That never happened." The judge immediately called for order. Diddy's outburst was unprecedented, and the prosecution seized on it. "Your Honor, this is the very behavior we've been describing," one of the prosecutors said calmly. "He cannot control himself, even now." Cassie sat motionless, her eyes fixed ahead, refusing to look at the man who once controlled every facet of her life. According to Cassie's sworn testimony, the dark room was located in a private section of Diddy's Holmby Hills mansion, accessible only through biometric security. The entrance was hidden behind a false wall in the master bedroom closet. She testified that Diddy used the room as both punishment and performance. "He'd film everything," she said. "There were folders labeled by dates, nicknames, and even emotional states. Cassie crying 2, punishment session 3, submission test A. But perhaps more haunting than the physical abuse was the psychological manipulation. Cassie recounted how Diddy used sleep deprivation, forced drug use, and prolonged isolation to break her down. She described a session where she was made to kneel for hours while music blared through hidden speakers, only to be left in silence.